Good evening. Welcome to the City Council meeting of Wednesday, April 2nd, 2014. Could I have the roll call, please?
Salem Derby.
Present.
Dan Hagan.
Present.
Jennifer Hayes. J.P. Kwasinski.
Here.
Joe McCoy.
Here.
Dan Rist.
Here.
Tamara Smith. Here. Joy Winnie.
Here.
Nathan Ziegler.
Present.
Thank you. Could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of
Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Could I have a motion for the approval of minutes?
So moved.
March 19th. We have motion approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? No, all in favor. Great, thank you. Moving on to public speak time. I believe our city planner will introduce some important information for us tonight. Thank you. Just obviously state your name for the record, please.
Jessica Allen, City Planner. Before you tonight has been submitted easements for the Pleasant Street Mills Infrastructure Project. There are two sets of easements. One that's an easement between the city and WAMECO, the electric company. These easements are needed for WAMECO to actually put the installation of the electrical lines into the ground at the project site. The second set of easements are water line easements. These are updating existing easements on Mechanic Street for two property owners on Mechanic Street. There have been sewer easements in place at this location since 1968. This is adding language to allow water lines to be put into place. I urge the council to move quickly on these easement agreements. As you know, we are in a funding crunch. WAMECO cannot install the lines until the easements have been signed or in place. Right now at the project site, we have completed the trenching and the conduit installation. We're about 90% complete, and water line installation is going to begin as of next week. So we need these papers in place. So I urge you to please move as quickly as possible on them. And I'm happy to answer any questions at the property subcommittee meeting tomorrow night.
Great, that'd be
Okay.
perfect. So on that note, then, Councilor Ziegler, if you'd like to move those to property at this time, that would be terrific.
In the form of a motion, I'd like to move the two easement agreements for the Pleasant Street Mills infrastructure to the property subdivision.
Second.
Okay. Any comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Communications from elected officials, boards, committees. Councilor Rist.
I have two announcements to make, both for April 26th. There will be a bike auction sponsored by the City of Easthampton and the Police Department. This will take place at Easthampton Town Hall, 43 Main Street, as opposed to this building. The property is sold as is, and the successful bidder is responsible for immediate payment and removal of the property. The city reserves the right to reject any or all bids, and all sales are final. That's 10 a.m. on Saturday, April 26th. Also on Saturday, April 26th, a rabies clinic will be held at the Easthampton Public Safety Complex, 32 Payson Avenue. The fee is $19. The rabies clinic is from 1 to 2 p.m. Please bring proof of prior rabies vaccinations with you to the clinic. Easthampton dog licenses will also be on sale. So that's Saturday, April 26th, 10 o'clock for the bike auction at Town Hall, and 1 o'clock for the rabies clinic at the Public Safety Complex. That is all. Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you very much. Mayor Communications, Mayor Cadger.
I'd like to welcome you back, Barbara. Thanks for being here. Glad to see you. And I believe Barbara provided the counselors with an additional transfer, and I just request that you send that to Finance Subcommittee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We can start on to standing committees, Rules and Government Relations, Councilor Rist.
No report this evening, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Finance, Councilor Hagan.
We'll be taking up two supplemental appropriations in the public hearings. That'll start at 6:15. The $48,000 for supplementing the stabilization fund and $185,000 to fund an arbitration with a fire contract. We also will have our next meeting at April 9th at 6 p.m. room 1. And at that time, we'll be taking up several public works items. And I'd also at this time like to set two public hearings. I'd like, in the form of a motion, I'd like to set a public hearing tonight for $55,000 to the Veterans Benefits for a shortfall in Veterans Assistance, and a public hearing on the borrowing and bonding of $1,100,000 for an integrated water resource management plan.
Second?
Okay, a motion a second to set public hearings for the
April 16th.
this April 16th meeting for the $55,000 for the Veterans Benefits shortfall and for the $1,100,000 for the integrated water resource management plan. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
There's several items of new business, but probably I will take those
I
up
guess-
in
Yeah, we'll do
later
that
time.
since they're all finance again, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Public safety, I believe will be Counselor Winnie tonight.
Okay. So our next meeting will be Thursday, April 10th at 6 PM in Conference Room 1. We'll be discussing the traffic issues concerning, excuse me, Highland Avenue and Route 10 and finalize the discussion on the Autumn Drive Willow Circle Street acceptance. We will schedule no public hearings. We are having, at the April 16th, we have scheduled the hearing for the acceptance of Willow Circle and Autumn Drive for 6:15 in these chambers. Is that a motion? Okay.
No.
Or that, it's already scheduled? Yeah. Let's see. So I guess that's it.
Yeah, that concludes.
That concludes the report for public safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Winnie. Counselor Winnie, appointments.
Yeah. Okay, so we met tonight at 5:30 to review the appointment put up by the mayor for Marie Fiat for the Council on Aging. The term of expiration would be December 31st, 2015. And it was unanimous, 3-0, that we move forward with the appointment. This is a new appointment. She gave us a beautiful letter, basically outlining her experiences, and all were in favor of bringing forth the recommendation to the full council for a positive vote. So I'll make that in the form of a motion. Maria Fiat to the Council on Aging to December 31st, 2015.
Second.
Okay, a motion is second for the appointment of Maria Fiat to Council on Aging. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes.
And that's it for our report, because we have no appointments on our agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ordinance, Counselor Derby.
Thank you, Mr. President. All I have to report is that we are going to be meeting tomorrow night, which is April 3rd, here at 5:30 in Conference Room 1. That concludes my report.
And topic will be the Chapter 2, I guess. all
Chapter
you have
2 of
left,
the
right?
Acts of 2002, the only thing that's on our
Right,
agenda.
right, thank you very much.
Yep.
Property, Counselor Ziegler.
Okay, property will also be meeting tomorrow night, April 3rd, 6 PM in room 1 on the first floor to discuss the request for authorization to dispose of the Parsons Street School property, and in addition to that, the 2 easement agreements of the Pleasant Street Mills infrastructure project. We'd also like, in the form of a motion, to set a public hearing for April 16th at 6:15 in these chambers.
Second.
The motion is second to.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Two
for
easements.
For the easements.
for the
Okay.
easement.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, a motion is second for the public hearing for the 2 easements for the Pleasant Mills project. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. And does that conclude?
That concludes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I guess we can move on to new business. Counselor Hayden.
We have several new supplemental appropriations. I'll do a first reading on all of them and then ask in the form of one motion that they all be moved to finance. The first is a supplemental appropriation dated March 26, 2014. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $10,000 and would be appropriated from the enterprise retained earnings and appropriated to the wastewater treatment capital purchase to fund the amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to fund the capital expense of the NPDS permit requirements. Second supplemental appropriation, also dated March 26, 2014, is hereby hereby requested for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested, $15,000, to be appropriated from retained earnings, and that amount, $15,000, appropriated to the wastewater treatment capital purchase, $15,000, for the following purpose: to fund capital purchase to replace the gravity thicker pump. Our third supplemental appropriation dated March 26, 2014. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $60,000 to be appropriated from enterprise retained earnings, $60,000 appropriated to wastewater treatment capital purchase, $60,000. Amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to fund the capital expense for pump station improvements. The next is a supplemental appropriation dated March 11th, 2014. The request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $15,000 to be appropriated from the CPA Historic Preservation Fund. In that amount, $15,000 and appropriated to Historic Records Preservation. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to fund the preservation of historic records in the city clerk office. And the final item, which is new tonight, is an interdepartmental transfer. That's dated, if we could move the first supplemental appropriations of the $10,000, $15,000, $60,000, and $15,000. I'll make that in the form of a motion.
Okay, so we have a motion, a second, to advance those 4 supplemental appropriations to finance. Any additional discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
The last item in new business is interdepartmental transfer dated March 31st, 2014. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $11,700 to be transferred from the reserve fund, $11,700, and transfer to fire vehicle repairs, $11,700. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to provide funds for engine and ladder 1 repairs. I'll make that in the form of a motion that item also be sent to finance.
Okay, a motion, a second, to move the interdepartmental transfer of $11,700 to finance. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
That concludes new business.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we enter public hearings, I know this has come up a little bit. We don't often have issues relating directly to arbitration, but this is just for the counselors. When we are talking about the appropriation of the funds for arbitration for the contract, discussion has to only related to that appropriation, nothing else to do with contracts that could potentially be a violation of fair labor law. So your questions need to be directly related to that appropriation. After that vote has been made, because there's been some interest, there will be an opportunity to ask the fire chief or the union any questions concerning contract once that vote is completed. But I just wanted to put that down so everyone is aware we stand after arbitration decisions are rendered. So at that moment, I think we're close enough. I will accept a motion to open public hearings.
So moved.
Okay, a motion, a second, to open public hearings. Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. It looks like it's Councilor Hagan.
The first public hearing tonight is a supplemental appropriation. I'll do a second reading. The supplemental appropriation dated February 26, 2014. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $48,300 and to be appropriated from the Enterprise Retained Earnings Fund. In that amount, $48,300, and appropriated to the Stabilization Fund. The amount of $48,300. The amount requested be used for the following purpose: to replace stabilization funds used for the wastewater treatment capital equipment repair of an automatic bar screen at the treatment plant inlet. As a sort of a review of this particular item, before we ask members of the public to come forward, or the mayor can explain it also, this was an item we used to repair that automatic screener. It was sort of an emergency, and it would have involved a lot of extra overtime and hand work at the treatment plant rather than the automatic bar screen if we waited. So, but at the time, the council was assured that the stabilization fund would be replenished with that same amount, $48,300. So I don't know if the mayor would like to comment, or...
I think you handled it perfectly.
Okay, no additional comment. Yeah, it's always difficult not to argue with money going back into our stabilization fund. So if there is someone from the public who would like to address the council concerning this appropriation, feel free to come to the podium and state your name and address. Okay, not being seen any Counselor Hagan, I'll accept a motion.
I'll make the following motion that the council accept the supplemental appropriation of $48,300 and it be appropriated to, appropriated from enterprise retained earnings and appropriated to stabilization fund in that amount, $48,300 for replacement of stabilization fund used for the wastewater treatment capital equipment repair of an automatic bar screen at the treatment plant inlet.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for supplemental appropriation of the $48,300 back to the stabilization fund. Any additional comments or discussion? Being said, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes.
Second public hearing tonight is also a supplemental appropriation request, and I will do a second reading on that. This is dated February 26, 2014. Request is hereby made for approval of the following appropriation. The amount requested is $185,000 to be appropriated from free cash in the amount of $185,000 and appropriated to the following. Fire prior year retro for FY12 and FY13, $75,000. Ambulance prior year retro FY12 and FY13, $10,000. Fire full-time permanent, $60,000. Fire holidays, $2,800. Ambulance EMS incentive, $9,400. Fire incentive, $7,900. Fire captain, $1,100. Fire overtime, $15,700. And ambulance overtime, $3,100. The amount requested to be used for the following purpose: to fund the arbitrated fire contract. Finance met on this for 2 meetings, at which time it was relayed to us that this was a matter that was ongoing for 3 years of a negotiation between the city and the fire union. It was not resolved at that level. It had to be sent to arbitration, or was sent to arbitration, at which time an arbitrator came back with this ruling of the financial package and the other items in the contract. And both the fire chief and mayor and the fire union were all present and made their comments. I know the mayor, her position has been, and certainly I'll ask her to come up and speak, but I believe her position has been that she has to propose what the arbitrator says. We did have a lot of discussion also from my fellow counselors prior to the ruling by the 2 attorneys of what we could and couldn't discuss and what might be discussed. What it essentially is for this, and as you know, I don't have to read the figures again that are going into all these line items, but what is being really proposed is a cost of living of 1.5, 1.5, and 1.5 over the past 3 years. Again, this was a contract that the fire union has been without a contract since July of 11, and this will take them up to July of 13, and I believe they'll be going into negotiations very shortly if they're not there already. So with that, maybe the mayor could come up and just speak briefly on
Just what you said, Dan, I'll be speaking very briefly. When the contract goes to arbitration and the arbitration rules, I am bound by law to present the funding request to the city councils for your approval. And that's what you have here in front of you, and that's what you'll be voting on. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to comment on this appropriation? Again, only this appropriation. Okay. I see no one else coming out. Any councilors have anything to say within realms of our, what we can say? Councilor Riss.
With regard to the appropriation, first of all, I think it's well-deserved. 1.5% is very low. The arbitrator actually favored the city, as I recall, with regard to this, and did not increase the award beyond what we could afford as a city, and that's a good thing. But 1.5% for the residents out there that think we're giving a big raise to the firemen, we're not. This is 1.5% probably doesn't even come close to the cost of living, and I'm happy we can at least do that. And I think we need to recognize how valuable our firemen are. The loss of 2 firemen this past 2 weeks has made me realize what they put, our public safety officers, our firemen and our police, put their lives on the line for us. 1.5% is nothing. So I urge us to vote for it. I also am happy to see that the mayor is sitting next to the union head and amongst the union. And I'm hoping a level of trust is regained in the next negotiation, which apparently is beginning immediately. I received a notice from our Director of Human Resources, Risa Rigat, that we spent in the city $22,000 on labor and arbitration fees to get this contract done. That's a lot of money. And I know the union probably spent a lot there too. I'm hoping that we can do better, get this contract, the next contract done with realistic proposals from both sides and a level of trust, so that kind of money can be saved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a
That's not a motion, I just made a discussion. There's no motion.
yeah, okay.
Just a quick comment. I'll concur with much of what Councilor Riss said about the amount of the appropriation. We've given other cost of livings in the city which have been in a similar range. Again, it's within the 2.5% that we can increase revenue. So again, I think it's a fair contract. I guess I would like to echo a little bit about not the process, because we're only talking about the amount, but as far as the ongoing arbitration, it was my understanding that the fire union was the one that got the majority of the items, and I guess I would concur with Councilor Riss that $22,000 seemed like a lot of money to be spent on negotiations that maybe could have been brought again. I wasn't part of them, so it's only my opinion, but it seems like the two sides could have maybe got together and saved both the city and the union arbitration money. But that said, I'm certainly supportive of the raise.
Okay. Unless there's any more councilor comments, no? I'll entertain a motion then, Councilor.
Yeah, I'll make the following motion. I make the motion that the following supplemental appropriation, the amount of $185,000 be approved by the council and will be appropriated from free cash in the amount of $185,000 to the following: fire prior year retro FY12 and 13 $75,000, ambulance prior year retro FY12 and 13 $10,000, fire full-time permanent $60,000, fire holidays $2,800, fire ambulance EMS incentive $9,400, fire incentive $7,900, fire captain $1,100, fire overtime $15,700, and ambulance overtime $3,100. The amount requested be used for the following purpose: to fund the arbitrated fire contract.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the supplemental appropriation of the $185,000 for the arbitrated fire contract. Any additional discussion or comments? Councilor Riss?
Just that I'm hoping the fireman and the chief will stay after I have a comment to make on the contract itself. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. As we had said, we approved that appropriation because it is contract related. If the fire chief or maybe Jason.
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I just
Oh, you have a comment?
statement.
Okay, I'm sorry. I guess we don't need you then.
Somebody might want to comment on it. It has been quite clear to all of you that I have been opposed up until this time to the 24-hour call system that has now been established by this contract. And for the residents of the city that might be watching, that means a fireman is on duty for 24 hours at least. And as I understand it, can be called in for another shift, but the chief is going to try, correct me if I'm wrong, to keep that to 10 hours. But I have been turned around on this. I had initially thought that sleep deprivation would impair the judgment of our public safety or firemen, especially when they're on a paramedic call after being up for 24 hours. It scared me. But I am much more comfortable with it now, having spoken especially to the firemen. I had done a lot of research and found some sleep deprivation arguments primarily from the medical community and the medical institutions, but I have not been able to find anything that relates to incidents that occurred during fire calls. And this apparently has been in place in some places for 25 years. And with the ability of the internet to give us information, that's amazing, which means it is being carefully dealt with. That's one factor. Prior to this, the current system, the system prior to this new system, if I'm correct, Chief, meant that we would have to call firemen in for longer than 24 hours to cover for understaffed shifts. And many times firemen were on duty for 48 hours. The difficulty with this is that it's not predictable because you don't know what's going to happen. So what was actually on the ground, what was actually happening, was worse than the system that we now have. So that turned me around as well. One of the things, and I urge all the counselors, when you have an initial argument about something that's out there, talk to the other side, because I had a good conversation with Jason and the firemen that were at the Finance Committee meeting, and I was very happy to learn that one of the things the 24-hour call does for them is that they can do a better job of planning when they can be with their families. That really hit home to me. Apparently, the old system meant that they wouldn't know of when they could say, I'll be home to take their kids to some event or something because they might be called in. Now, with the new system, they have a better chance of being able to schedule themselves with their families, and that really makes a difference. So I am much more comfortable with 24-hour calls. I know a lot of people have heard that I was opposed to them. I think I was opposed to them for good reasons, but I am more comfortable now, and I know everyone on the fire department will be professional and be very careful that they get the rest they need. There is one element of the contract that I hope you'll reconsider next time around. I am not happy to see that only Blue Cross and Blue Shield is the only provider that's allowed to provide health insurance to the city. I know there's a lot of good providers out there beyond Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and I think the negotiation should be about plan design, not about who's going to do that plan. I'd like the city to be able to fund health care in a more quotation way so they can give a proper quote once the plan has been designed. So I'm urging that that language be removed from future contracts. I'd like to see that out of there. That is all, and I thank you guys.
So I'll give you the opportunity to, you don't have to, but if you'd like to respond.
Sure, I've been here so many times, I feel like I'm part of you. I'd like to just address a few of the things. First of all, the 24-hour shifts were not part of the arbitrator's award.
Right.
Mayor Tausnick agreed to it because they would have been part of the arbitrator's award. For the past probably 10 years, every time that has gone to arbitration, the arbitrating panel has awarded 24-hour shifts. So Mayor Tausnick felt it'd be best to eliminate one item from the arbitration. As far as sleep deprivation, and I understand your concern, with the previous schedule they worked 2 consecutive 14-hour night shifts. So for 2 consecutive nights, they were exposed to sleep deprivation. The way they work now, they work a shift, they're off for 2 days. They come in on the 3rd day, work another shift, then they're off for 4. So they're only getting 1 night of uninterrupted sleep at best every 3 nights. Under the old system, they could have gone 2 consecutive nights, and that didn't factor in overtime, and that did not factor in mandatory holdover to maintain 5 firefighters on duty. So under the 24-hour shift schedule, it actually reduces the threat of them working on sleep deprivation. The other added perk to 24-hour shifts to the city is it reduces every day 1 shift change at 5:30, which would lead to the potential for an ambulance holdover. If an ambulance call came in at 5 o'clock, that crew normally does not get back to the station until 6:15. So we're paying them 1 to 2 hours overtime. That's probably the most popular time or common time for ambulance calls. So we've eliminated 1 more chance to generate overtime. Is it going to be a cost-saving measure? I don't know. It'll take us a year or 2 to figure out. But looking at the historical trends, the 5:30 shift change was probably our most expensive for holdovers, whether it be motor vehicle accidents, whatever. But that seemed to be a big hit on overtime. On the Blue Cross Blue Shield, the arbitrator upheld keeping that language in.
I didn't know that.
That was part of the arbitration. The arbitrator panel left that in there as part of their ruling. Former mayor and the city's labor attorney figured that that would come out of there, but it didn't. So that language that's in there stays because that's how the arbitrator awarded it. And I agree with you, Counselor. I think the only person or group of people that won in this arbitration was the attorneys and the arbitrators. But if you're looking for a win or lose, I think it was a draw, but I think the city made out very well compared to other arbitrators' rulings that have been awarded. the city was only asking for 1.5% less than what was awarded for a pay raise. So I think that's a pretty good nod to the personnel director and the labor attorney who did 90% of the negotiations. The city wasn't seeking to not fund a livable wage increase. And I think the arbitrators panel upheld that.
Thank you. Very
That's- Unless anybody has any questions?
Any additional questions for Cap? No? Okay, thank you for your
Thank
time. Okay, I guess
Move the public hearings be closed.
okay, we have a motion for, motion second to close public hearings. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes. And I guess we've gone through all our business, so I will accept a motion to adjourn at this point. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, motion passes. 16.
Just Joe?